I'm Chief Ken Gamble with the Kernersville Police Department. It's a pleasure and honor to be with you this evening at the fundraiser for Next Step Ministries. I've been in law enforcement for 23 years, and back in the late 80s when I went through rookie school, we literally were told that our job in domestic violence situations was to make the couple kiss and make up. Things have changed a lot since then. In the late 90s, we had a movement towards holding the offender accountable in a domestic violence situation. And that's really what we need to focus on. Not asking the victim, why do you stay in the relationship? Why do you let this person harm you? Why do you let your children see these things? But to focus on the offender and ask those questions of the offender. Why do you harm the person who you say you love? Why do you show this kind of behavior to your children? Why? Domestic violence is something that is not comfortable to talk about. My mother would probably have told me that it wasn't a subject of polite conversation. And we find that we're slowly getting that to change in society. Here's some things that we do know about domestic violence. We do know that more women are injured during domestic violence situations than car accidents, muggings, and rapes combined. We do know that domestic violence causes $5.8 billion in damages, and that's a combination of health cost and lost wages. We do know that domestic violence causes around 8 million lost days of work a year, and that's just in the U.S. alone. We do know that every day 3 or more women are killed by their husbands or their boyfriends. And we do know that domestic violence is a cycle. It's a cycle that has to be broken before the victim can get out of that relationship and not go into another violent relationship. It has to be broken. And we know this because a new generation of domestic violence offenders and victims is coming up even now. We know that offenders who frequently abuse their partners also, half the time, frequently abuse children. And we know that domestic violence, when witnessed by children in the home, that males are twice as likely to become offenders than children who are raised outside of a domestic violence environment. And that is why the Kernersville Police Department has partnered with Next Step Ministries. We've been with them since the beginning in 1999, and we continue to partner with them to serve the public and to serve victims of domestic violence to break the cycle.
He seemed to be a nice guy. He was charming and, witty. And
I was in a relationship for 3 years, and I guess the first 2 years was good, and the last year just became very violent.
I didn't even know I'd never even heard the term domestic violence.
I remember when I was 7 months pregnant with twins, there had been an argument, and I was leaving the townhome, and he kicked me in the back.
He said, "Did you think that I was lying when I said if I couldn't have you, couldn't anybody have you?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "I will kill you."
Domestic violence is when one person in an intimate partnership chooses to use a system of power and control to maintain a system of dominance over their partner. And this includes physical, sexual, emotional, psychological abuse.
I thought the man loved me, and love is not supposed to hurt. Or, whether it's mental, verbal, or physical, love is not supposed to hurt.
Everybody has heard the statement, anyone can be a victim of domestic violence, and that certainly is true. It doesn't matter what their race, gender, religion, socioeconomic group, sexual orientation. Our own language contributes to the myth that all victims are females and all perpetrators are males. But in fact, we know that's not true. The large majority of victims are females, which is why we use the pronoun she. And a large number of perpetrators are male.
I think that a lot of people in this country, and probably around the world, think that abuse is black eyes, missing teeth, broken noses, broken jaws, and things like that. But the reality of it is that abuse starts much, 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 much earlier with more subtle forms of control.
It was always his way or no way.
You never really knew, so you were always on your toes.
Anything from things that I bought to how I cooked.
And he could start a fight over anything.
He is the one who is making the demands, and she feels responsible for making sure those demands are met. And then he reminds her in one way or another that if those demands aren't met, that he's entitled to correct her or chastise her. Then I think she needs to take a serious look at the dynamics and where this relationship is headed, because those are the things that are red flags for me.
Just because you love somebody doesn't mean what they're doing to you isn't wrong. And I explain that to him when a victim says, but I love him, or I love her. I understand that, but the state of North Carolina and the people it represents say what's happening here is wrong.
And yes, I loved my ex-husband, but he didn't love me like I loved him. And by what he did to me and my kids just showed me that he didn't love us.
A lot of times what you experience early on is a general sense of dislike from the person. Don't sit by and do nothing when you start to get those feelings, because typically what will happen, that will escalate. It will escalate into either hitting, it will escalate into things like depriving you of money.
I was only 16 years old. I was a junior in high school, and he started being very controlling, like not want me to go to the store, or not want me to call my mom on the phone.
When you're in a domestic violence situation, they won't let you out, you know, to go grocery shopping, and they won't let you work because they don't want no other man telling you what to do.
It doesn't really start with a hit or a slap or a punch. It starts with, you know, controlling, belittling.
Because we live in such a violent society, we oftentimes pay little attention to emotional abuse, name-calling, things like that.
The verbal abuse started with name-calling and gradually went to mentally. You know, he was saying that you're not pretty, you're too fat, no man will want you, I'm the only
Another
one
control dynamic that you see in abusive relationships is intimidation. This can be looks or gestures that are threatening to somebody, displaying or using weapons in the presence of somebody in a threatening manner.
And he just liked to be in control. And he'd use anything, everything that he could get his hands on.
A marriage or relationship is a partnership. It's not an ownership, it's a partnership, and people have to understand that.
Whenever we needed groceries, he would only give me like $20 for 4 kids and 2 adults. I had to beg in order to get for us to, you're the blame for this. You're the one that caused this. In his head, he believed that it was me.
That would take me back into the relationship, because I felt like, you know what, I can do better. There's something different I can do. I'll make him want me in the way that I want him.
A woman may be seriously emotionally abused by someone, and she might turn to a family member or a neighbor to talk about it, and they might say to her, well, at least he's not hitting you. So that sort of disempowers her further and makes her feel that, well, maybe I'm making a big deal out of nothing, and he's had a bad day, so I need to figure out some way to soothe his nerves or whatever. And then she starts to take on responsibility.
Which is what you and I see when we go to Walmart or when we go to the restaurant. Everybody has a public face. But as soon as that door closes at the house, there's a private face. And that's what you have to worry about.
My family didn't know what was going on. I mean, they had an idea, but they didn't know for sure, because I never told nobody. I never told anybody anything of what was happening to me, what he was doing to me. It was
Because
all
domestic
stayed behind
violence
closed
has
doors.
historically been seen as a private and family issue, people are very hesitant to talk about it.
I tried to reach out to one of the families. They did show sympathy first, and then they withdrew back. They started avoiding me, and they wouldn't return my calls.
People aren't very sympathetic to family violence for some reason. For some reason, I think you get the attitude that you must have done something, or why did you say that, or shouldn't you maybe handled it differently?
A lot of people didn't really know what was going on behind closed doors. All they knew is what they heard and what they saw, which was just a little verbal abuse, you know, controlling. But inside, it was different. There was times that I didn't know whether I was going to live to the next day because he would use ball bats on me. He would hit me with sticks. He would use his fist. When he was in the home, we felt like we were prisoners. We could not do anything. We couldn't do, my kids couldn't go outside to play. They couldn't go out and work in their little flower beds that they had made, fear of him getting mad at us and hitting on us.
I was so ashamed. I was so ashamed of being hurt, first of all, and not having a stable family.
Before, I felt very confident in my life. I was all kinds of awards and athletics and all of this. And so to be in such a place of having no confidence was like looking in the mirror and not knowing who you were.
I'm Pete Kunkel, minister at First Christian Church. I just wanted to share for a moment a little bit about the history of Next Step Ministry. A number of years ago, domestic violence hit very close to my life when a school teacher at Piney Grove named Martha was killed by her husband. I had met with her earlier that week and realized that she had been in conflict with her husband, and I knew both her and her husband well. And at that time we had no shelter, and I really didn't think it would go as far as it did, but he ended up killing her and then killing himself. At that point, I realized there needed to be something done in Kernersville to give women a place of safety. And another guy by the name of Tim Mitchell and I began to work to develop a ministry called Next Step. It started in a very humble way in a trailer. And we had our first full-time person to work with the ladies, and it was a very humble beginning and almost a sad beginning because we were always hoping for something better. And when I look at the ministry now and the home and the growth of that ministry, it's just incredible. And I'm so happy that we as a community have taken a step to touch the lives of women in many instances that are unable to secure themselves or to help themselves in this time of need. And we've been able to give them a place of security and safety and hope.